I think I'm very fortunate in that I teach subjects I believe are extremely important. And so my approach to teaching is typically one that's centred in showing how important these subjects potentially are. Not just saying these subjects are important to your day-to-day, but also showing they have insights for bigger concepts. So a quick example of that is, again, statistics. Many statistical concepts you can show people in their day-to-day lives. When they go into the shops, what's the distribution of prices, for example? But at the same time, you can abstract and say, well, how do you formulate knowledge about prices in economics? We see the prices, but how can we say something about the underlying drivers of those prices? And so talking about both day-to-day life and abstract concepts like knowledge is something that's really important to me. So passion and connecting to both the details of knowledge and the big questions is really important. What's a typical class that I teach? I like the American system of pop quizzes. Students come in, there's a pop quiz on the table. It means that they're constantly reviewing important concepts. So I typically get students to do a pop quiz. And those pop quizzes are great because then you can ask questions about your teaching. Last question, added bonus point if you can tell me something I should be doing better next week. Then we sit down, and before I hand out the homeworks, I want us to think bigger thoughts. So I always start with the sort of bigger picture. What is the subject we're going to look at today? What are the big concepts that you need to understand? And though there's going to be a lot of detailed statistics, why is it that we're studying it? I then give out the homeworks, and I think giving as much feedback as possible, not just in the homeworks themselves, but when you give it. Make a comment. Well done. This was a really nice piece of work. You've advanced great from last week, and you responded to the comments I made last week. But what about doing this for next week? I think students appreciate hugely because it gives them real direction in their progress in the class. Once everyone's got their grades, we start then to go through the problem sets or go into the details of some statistics. I don't believe that you should just every time go through the answers of a problem set or think about in great detail a particular element. What I think is useful is saying, how are we going to get people to understand the 2 or 3 really key principles and flesh those 2 or 3 key principles out using examples, trying to relate to their daily life, trying to relate to the passions they have. And that will take me to about 3/4 of the way through a class. So now we've done the big picture stuff. We've reviewed their progress and we've taken them through the details. Not of everything, but of the really key stuff. Then the last quarter or so, I think it's absolutely critical to say, this is what you need to go and start thinking about, making yourself prepared for the lectures that are coming up or the reading you're about to do. Ready their mind to absorb the big picture and the details that they're about to undertake. At the very end, it's all about questions. So I talk to my students throughout. I make sure everyone is involved at some point, and I also give them the opportunity to then ask me questions throughout. But at the end I say, okay, have we understood everything? Let's do a very quick review. Do you guys get everything we've done? And if they don't, now's the time to concretize that understanding by going through with me in detail any last niggling things they don't understand. And maybe I won't tell them a full answer, but I'll say, read this, go and watch this, or come and talk to me at this point. But it just allows them that last few moments of, right, I'm a bit nervous, I'm almost at the end of this class, I don't quite understand it. Well then, let's make sure that those nerves at least have somewhere to be relieved, either in a book they're going to read or in a conversation with me after the class. How do I address the diverse student needs that often come with a heterogeneous class? So where you've got students from many different backgrounds, often starting with statistics or economics from very different starting points. Well, I approach that informed by my work outside of academia. So when I was working in the Nigerian civil service, I'd often find people who may have the same qualifications but had very different aptitudes. All of them were in important positions, and therefore all of them needed to understand these basic concepts of statistics. So firstly, it's important that you have these individual conversations. Before I was talking about having conversations with people, that's not just with the class as a whole, but it's about tracking each individual's progress. And I think getting to know each individual is something that they very much appreciate. Now turning to UCL, I think one of the strong things I've heard from my students is the fact that I learn their names. I will invite them to individual tutorials to make sure that their progress is all right, and particularly looking after the students at the bottom end of the distribution, making sure they're with us. All those things means that students believe in you, that you care about them. And it's not just the students who are struggling that you should worry about, but at the top end, you should be pushing those students. Now, this is something that any teacher from primary school all the way up to tertiary education struggles with. When you've got students who are finding it difficult, how do you take a middle line? Well, I would say you need individual tutorials with those at the bottom. But at the top end, you need to push those guys to, in the tertiary sector, read papers, start thinking about research, start thinking about how they're going to advance their knowledge beyond just undergraduate. And it's been fantastic to see some of my students take the courses and the lessons that I've given them and actually move beyond the boundaries of the course because of their extra ability and start learning about things that are beyond undergraduate. That's, it's incredibly rewarding for me to see those students do pretty exceptional work. Not just differences in students' ability that I've had to confront, but also differences in their passion and interest in the subject. So particularly in economics, students come to the degree with an interest in finance, and the degree is merely a stepping stone to a very big wage and a very big salary. How do you motivate students who really are just seeing the degree as a stepping stone to take the subject seriously and be passionate about these big subjects? So I think firstly you have to be, you have to confront that in a very real way. They have their own preferences, and I don't think you should feel that is wrong. You should say, well, if that's your interest, let me try and make connections between your passions and your interests and mine. I think that's one of the big roles of a teacher. So I often have to talk about finance, I have to talk about options and hedge funds, and at the same time bring it to why that might be something that we can analyse within the subjects I'm teaching, such as microeconometrics, which is the statistics of economics. So I've often tried to link financial issues to microeconometrics, and then I think this is the really important step, show them that what they're interested in isn't just linked to the subject, but has great similarities with a whole host of other topics. And so you say, well, you're interested in what motivates people to make money. I'm interested in exactly the same subject, but in Nigeria's federal government, where people are trying to make money corrupt. They're trying to steal money. And then talking about how motivations and incentives in these two different settings might have great similarities, and how we can analyse both using a common framework of tools. So linking their passions to my own has always been something that's been important to me. But then secondly, I think you do need to be a bit entertaining. You need to realise that sometimes students are not there purely to learn for learning's sake. And therefore you have to make them realise why this is interesting. And to do that, you have to bring out the best of the subject in terms of its entertainment value. So this does not mean shows or dances. What it means is saying, there's something extremely exciting about this subject, and here's what it is. And I think, so I've had lots of students interested in finance, and I think doing those two things has almost invariably brought them on board. And at the end, there's some of the students who work hardest because they see that the tools I'm teaching them not only will have important ramifications for their professional career, they now see how they can use these tools in finance, but they also see that they can use these tools in the rest of their lives. Is that when they walk out into the street and they see people behaving in the way they do, you can use these tools to understand why people are motivated in the way they are. So it's building a connection, a link between the life that they wanted and the life that they're living, as well as the subject that you're teaching. I worked in the federal government of Nigeria for about 7 years and have taught civil servants in the government there. I've worked with teaching consultants in the development sector, and then I came and worked with students here at UCL. And what I've learnt by coming from the field into postgraduate teaching is first professionalism. I think you need to treat students as customers, and they deserve a professional teaching environment. And that's something that as a professional is expected of you in the field, so when you come to UCL it was very natural to continue that progression. Secondly, everyone responds to passion. If I was working with civil servants in Nigeria, I may not be able to talk in such complex ways about statistics, for example, one of the subjects I teach. So they may be interested in means and standard deviations, but if you show them what a mean can mean, or why a standard deviation can be informative, and be passionate about it, and at the same time when you're in a class talking about more complex concepts such as likelihood ratios, bringing passion in all those areas makes people warm to you and I think allows them to receive information more effectively. And then finally, I think conversation is something that I learnt very much in the field. Because people in the field don't see an academic environment like a university, they have a job. Why should they listen to you? And so bringing them into the conversation is absolutely critical when you're working with people in a professional setting, having a discourse. And so when I came to UCL, continuing that notion of a discourse rather than me just purely lecturing, I think was really